Math 1332, Chapter 7, Consumer Mathematics, Section 3, Simple Interest, Video 7, The Banker's Rule. What is the Banker's Rule? That's actually really simple. Well, I didn't mean for all that to show up yet, but it's already there. All right. The Banker's Rule is really simple. It says 1 year is equal to 360 days. I know 1 year is equal to 365 days unless it's a leap year, in which case it is 366 days. So what's up with this 360? Well, first off, it stems from assuming a month has 30 days. But the reason this is a rule is because investing and borrowing predates calculators by decades. What does that mean? That means people have been borrowing and investing money way before there was technology to do the math. So somebody had to do it by hand. If the term of an investment was in days, you had to divide by 365 to get the number of years. Remember, the formula requires that the term be in years. But when dividing by hand, I know it says diving, but when dividing by hand, where are we? Here we are. But when dividing by hand, dividing by 360 is much easier. Why? Because 360 is divisible by 24 different numbers. I'm not going to list them all, but 360 is divisible by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, by 6, by 8, by 9, by 10, by 12, by 15, by 18, and then after that, they start spreading out some more. But why is that important? How come being divisible by a bunch of numbers is good? Because when you convert days to years, you're dividing by 360, which means you're putting 360 on the bottom of a fraction, which means that number is ridiculously reducible. So why is that a benefit? Well, let's say you borrow money for 90 days. If we divide it by 365, we would have to manually divide 90 divided by 365 using long division and decimals. Remember, we're talking before technology. That fraction does reduce to 18 over 73, which is still a task manually to divide because as a decimal, it has a repeating block of 8 digits. In other words, you get 8 decimal digits before it starts repeating those 8 digits again. Then after that, you still have to multiply with it in the formula I equals P times R times T. So in a nutshell, dividing by 365 is very inconvenient when you're doing math by hand. But if we use 360, then the term would be 90 divided by 360, which reduces to 1/4, which is a much easier decimal to work with. So in short, the Banker's Rule says there's 360 days in a year, and before technology, that made changing days to years much easier to do manually. So if any problem says to use the Banker's Rule, it's implying that the term will be given in days, and you are to divide by 360 to convert it to years. Let me say that again, because this is really all it is. If any problem says to use the Banker's Rule, it's implying that the term will be given in days, and you are to divide by 360 to convert it to years. Aside from that, it's just another interest problem. For example, find the simple interest on an $1,800 loan at 6% for 120 days. Use the Banker's Rule. Our principal is $1,800. Our interest rate is 6%, 0.06. Our term is 120 days, but remember, the term has to be in years in the simple interest formula. The Banker's Rule says if you have days to convert to years, divide by 360. Now, this will reduce all the way down to 1/3, but we'll leave it like that because we're going to get out a calculator anyway, and we're being asked to find the interest. Our formula ties all this together nicely. Interest is principal times rate times time. So our interest is going to be 1,800 times 0.06 times 120 over 360. And just like when we converted months to years, I think it's cleaner and quicker to not calculate the time as a decimal, but rather leave it as that fraction, stick it inside the formula, and then when you get to type the formula, just type divided by when you get to the fraction bar. 1,800 times 0.06 times 120 divided by 360 is exactly 36. So if you borrowed this money under these conditions and they use the banker's rule, your interest would be $36. Now, as far as using the banker's rule, it's over. But you might be asking the question, what if I use 365? I've got the technology, I got it right here in my hand. Would I get the same answer? Well, let's think about it. Why think about it? Let's just do it. I'm going to put it back in my calculator, but let's use 365 instead. What do you think will happen to the interest? 1,800 times 0.06 times 120 divided by 365. And the interest is $35.50. So the true interest should be about 51 cents, excuse me. The true interest should be about 50 cents lower. So is there an advantage to the bank using the banker's rule? Well, if you borrowed money using the banker's rule, they're actually charging you a slightly higher interest rate by using 360 instead of 365. Is it lawsuit worthy? Well, you tell me. Are you going to sue over 50 cents? But do banks still use it despite today's technology? Some do. The word today's here should have an apostrophe. You know that's going to drive me crazy. Some do. And let's go ahead and do the moving highlight that I did before. I kind of like that. I may do that more. All right, so do banks still use it despite today's technology? Some do. Why? Because it's the way we've always done it. It's tradition. That makes it okay. But there may be a more nefarious reason. That is supposed to say more. I don't know what an or nefarious reason is, but there may be a more nefarious reason, and I kind of just addressed it. When you divide by 360, you get a larger rate than the true rate obtained by dividing by 365. So when you borrow money, they're actually charging you a slightly higher interest rate, meaning you pay more interest. Now it works the other way around. If you're investing money, they would be paying you more. But do banks actually do this?